Hello guys, welcome to my channel. And tonight, prepare yourself to enter a world filled with mystery and fear. But before we begin, please leave a comment and tell me, what country are you watching from? I want to know which corners of the world this horror story is reaching. Okay, here we go. I had only meant to stay for a week. The ad described it as a quiet room in an old townhouse on the outskirts of the city. Cheap, furnished, with a private entrance. Perfect for someone like me who needed a place to reset, think, and maybe figure out where everything had gone wrong. The photos looked fine. A small bed, a desk, a window facing the backyard. I booked it without hesitation. The landlord was a man in his 60s, wiry and silent, with eyes that stayed fixed too long on mine. He gave me the keys, pointed down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of mold and bleach, and muttered, "Stay out of the basement." I wasn't planning on exploring anyway. I just wanted sleep. But that first night, I didn't get any. It started with the sound of something moving. No, dragging beneath the floorboards. Like furniture being slowly pulled across the basement concrete. But there was no one else here. The landlord's quarters were upstairs, and the door to the basement was padlocked. I checked. Twice. I told myself it was old plumbing or animals. But then came the tapping. Rhythmic. Deliberate. It would start around 1:23 a.m. each night. Always in threes. Tap, tap, tap. And then silence. On the fourth night, the tapping changed. It turned into whispering. I thought it was coming from the vent near the floor. I got down on my knees and leaned in. My heart thumped in my ears. The voice was low, distant, but I caught fragments. "He's listening now. Not supposed to be here. So watch the window." I jerked back and stared at the vent. Just cold metal and dust. That night I pushed the desk in front of the vent, but by then it had already gotten in. Sleep became impossible after the whispers. I tried everything. Earplugs, white noise, even music on low volume, but none of it helped. Every night, just past 1:23 a.m., the tapping would start again. It never deviated. Tap, tap, tap. Then the hush would follow, like someone leaning close to speak from behind a wall. By the sixth night, I was running on maybe 6 hours of sleep total. My thoughts felt heavy and slow. Time started blurring at the edges. I'd look at my phone and realize hours had passed without me noticing. I wasn't dreaming. I couldn't even sleep long enough to. On the seventh day, I finally confronted the landlord. He was standing in the backyard, pruning dead branches from a tree that looked older than the house itself. When I approached, he didn't look up, just kept clipping in silence. I cleared my throat. "Hey, I've been hearing noises from under the floor, like something moving and voices. Are there pipes or someone else living down there?" He paused just for a moment. His hand tightened around the shears. "No one goes in the basement," he said. "That's the rule." "Right, you mentioned that. But I said no one goes down there," he repeated louder now. Then he turned slowly, looked me in the eye. "It's for your own good." And just like that, he walked past me and into the house, leaving the shears hanging from a branch. I didn't follow. I stood there for a while, staring at the open window of my room. The curtains swayed in a wind I couldn't feel. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I set up my phone to record. I placed it near the vent and hit record around midnight. Then I sat on the bed staring at the door, every light on, the desk still blocking the vent. I didn't expect anything clear, maybe just a few soft thumps, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, the video was completely black. My phone's battery had drained after 23 minutes, which didn't make sense. It was plugged into the charger the whole time. But the audio, I listened with headphones, heart racing. Most of it was silence, then faint static, then breathing, shallow, measured, not mine, then something else, a faint scraping sound, like nails against concrete. Then a voice, low and hoarse, almost a growl. "Move the desk." I ripped the headphones off. There was no way anyone could have been in the room. I checked the locks. The windows were closed. The desk was still in place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gotten closer, that whatever was beneath the house was beginning to understand me, maybe even watching me the way I watched it. I didn't leave, though. I told myself I was just tired. That exhaustion makes you imagine things. But then I started seeing the shadows. Not the ones cast by light, no. These moved differently. I would be in the kitchen, and in the reflection of the microwave, I'd see something dart past the doorway behind me, a movement too quick to be real. Or I'd be brushing my teeth, glance at the mirror, and catch a dark outline standing just outside the bathroom door. When I turned, nothing would be there. But my gut told me I wasn't alone. The worst part came 3 nights later. I woke up to the sound of my own voice whispering, except I wasn't speaking. My mouth was closed, my throat dry. But I could hear my own voice whispering from inside the vent, low and frantic, as if repeating something over and over. I got off the bed shaking and approached the vent. This time, I didn't block it. I got down on all fours and listened. The whispering stopped. And then, unmistakably, I heard myself say, "You already let it in." My blood ran cold. That was the moment I realized something had changed. I hadn't just been hearing it. It had been hearing me too. I didn't leave the room for a full day. Something had shifted the night before, and though the house was still, I felt watched. Not by a person, but by the house itself. As if the walls had memory, as if the floor remembered my footsteps and the ceiling listened for my breath. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. I thought about calling a friend or my brother, but what would I say? I'm hearing my own voice come from inside the walls. That's the kind of thing people pretend to laugh at, but never forget. Instead, I tried to act normal. I made coffee. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop, stared at the blinking cursor in a blank document for an hour. Tried writing something, anything, just to feel present. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to the vent. That evening, as the sky went slate gray and rain began tapping softly on the roof, I heard something I hadn't heard before. Footsteps above me. Not heavy, not like someone walking, more like pacing. Slow, methodical, heel to toe. The landlord lived upstairs, but I knew from his schedule that he never stayed in during storms. He always left early and returned late, claiming he preferred to wait them out in town. I climbed the stairs to the main hallway and paused at the base. The air felt denser, like walking into a room where someone had just had a long argument. I looked up. The lights on the upper floor were off. No movement, no voices. But the steps continued, creaking, deliberate. I took one step up. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. Then from the shadows above, something whispered. Not words this time, just breath. A long exhale, as if something had been standing just out of sight, watching me, listening. I backed down, closed my door, locked it. That night I stayed awake again, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me told me it wasn't safe to sleep. Around 1:23 a.m., the familiar tap, tap, tap returned. But this time it came from 2 places at once, from the vent and from the door. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. I sat on the bed, heart in my throat. My phone trembled in my hand. I wanted to record again, but couldn't lift my arm, couldn't breathe. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then from the other side of the door, my voice again, perfectly matching my tone, just slightly off like a recording from a scratch tape. "You are." The doorknob rattled once, not violently, but like someone testing it. Then nothing. I didn't sleep that night either. But at dawn, when I finally opened the door, something lay on the floor. A small, rusted key. Old, heavy, with a red thread tied around the end. I knew what it was for. The basement. I held it in my palm for hours, unsure if it was a warning or an invitation. My rational mind screamed to throw it away. To leave this place, drive anywhere, find a hotel and disappear. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when you're unraveling. By dusk, the air felt colder than usual. I noticed frost on the inside of the windows, though the temperature outside wasn't low enough to cause it. The entire house smelled faintly of damp soil and iron. and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know what was down there. I stepped into the hallway, every floorboard creaking under my weight. My hand clutched the key, knuckles white. The basement door sat at the end of the corridor, untouched, as if the house itself had forgotten it existed. The padlock was still there, hanging limp. I inserted the key. It fit perfectly. Click. The lock fell open with a dull metallic thud. As I opened the door, a wave of air hit me. Not cold, but stale. It smelled like something ancient had been sealed away for decades. The darkness below wasn't just absence of light. It was thick, like it had depth. I clicked on the light switch inside. Nothing. Of course. With only the flashlight on my phone, I stepped down. Each step grown louder than the last, as if warning me. The stairs descended deeper than expected, at least 2 stories below. The air grew wetter with every breath, and the walls around me narrowed slightly, pressing in. This wasn't a standard basement. It felt older, like it had been carved, not built. At the bottom, the light from my phone flickered once, and then I saw it. In the far corner of the basement stood a mirror, old, cracked, leaning against the wall. But it wasn't reflecting the room. It was reflecting me, standing still, holding the light. But in the reflection, I wasn't alone. Something stood behind me, something tall, shadowed, and smiling. I spun around. Nothing. Turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, now closer. My reflection began to move on its own. It raised its hand and waved. I don't remember climbing back up the stairs. All I remember is slamming the basement door shut, locking it, padlock and all, and leaning against it, chest heaving, heart pounding like a fist against my ribs. My reflection had moved on its own. That wasn't just a trick of the eye. It had waved, it had smiled, and I had seen something behind me. No, behind the version of me in the mirror. But there had been no one physically there. I stood frozen in that hallway, back pressed to the cold wood, the silence around me suddenly too quiet. Not peaceful, waiting. Eventually, my legs carried me back to my room. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and checked the corners. Twice. Everything was in place. But that night, sleep found me. Not because I felt safe, because I couldn't stay awake anymore. And when I did sleep, it wasn't restful. I dreamt of the mirror, only now it wasn't in the basement. It was in my room, leaning against the wall beside the window. I was in bed, staring at it from across the room, and in the dream I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. I knew what it was. I'd read about it, seen videos. But in the dream, I wasn't just paralyzed. I was being studied. The figure in the mirror. It had gotten closer, inches from the glass. A silhouette. No facial features, just the vague suggestion of a face. But I could feel its expression. Something hungry, something curious. It lifted one hand slowly and touched the inside of the mirror's surface. That's when I realized I was breathing differently. It wasn't my breath fogging the mirror. It was its breath. Then it turned its head, not toward the dream version of me, but toward the real me. I felt it looking directly through the dream, through the glass, through my sleeping body. And it whispered my name, not in anger, not in malice, with intimacy. That's what chilled me most. I woke with a scream caught in my throat, hands clutching the bedsheet, soaked in cold sweat. The room was dark. I checked the time, 1:19 a.m. 4 minutes. 4 minutes before the tapping would start. I didn't move. I sat perfectly still, and then, right on time, tap, 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 from the vent, from the door, from inside the wall, all at once. I curled into myself and covered my ears. I didn't want to hear it whisper again. I didn't want to hear my voice telling me I'd let it in. I wanted this to end, but something was changing now. I could feel it in the layout of the room. Subtle differences, like the corners had stretched a little further back, like the shadows clung too long to the edges. And the mirror from my dream, it wasn't in my room, but I kept thinking about it, like it had planted itself inside my mind, like it was waiting for an invitation to become real. Later that day, I tried to leave, I packed my bag in 10 minutes, didn't bother folding anything. I didn't want my deposit back. I didn't even want my clothes. I just wanted out. But when I turned the doorknob, something clicked inside the lock. It wouldn't open. Not jammed, locked. From the outside. I banged on the door, shouted, nothing. I tried the window, nailed shut. My phone, still no service. Not since the day I found the key. I was trapped. I sat down on the bed, defeated. Rain began to fall again, gently at first, then louder, pounding against the glass as if the sky itself wanted in. That's when I saw it. On the mirror above the desk, tiny letters drawn into the condensation of the glass. Come see. No one had been in the room. I hadn't touched the mirror, but there it was, wet writing across the surface. Come see. And underneath it, faint and nearly missed. It's not just beneath the floor anymore. I sat curled in the corner of the room, blanket pulled up to my chin, as if it could protect me from things I couldn't explain. My thoughts circled the same loop. You're not crazy, but if you tell anyone, they'll think you are. And somewhere deep down, I knew that whatever was happening wasn't just haunting me. It was studying me. The rain didn't stop. It had poured steadily for nearly 30 hours. The sound of it, once calming, had become an unrelenting white noise, like static from a broken television that no one remembered turning on. At night, I couldn't tell the difference between the rain hitting the roof and the whispers crawling through the walls. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the mirror on the desk. It was just a cheap square panel, barely big enough to reflect my face. But I kept remembering the other one, the one in the basement, and the thing behind the glass that looked like me but wasn't. I tried to convince myself the message had been some strange condensation pattern, my own breath, a coincidence. But every time I wiped the surface clean, it came back. Not the same words, different phrases, shorter, always in the same handwriting. You're almost ready. It listens through your eyes. You've already seen it, haven't you? I didn't want to respond. I didn't want to engage. But the human mind does strange things under pressure. One night, with the lights off and the whispers beginning again from the vents, I picked up a dry tissue and, with a trembling hand, wrote into the mirror, "What do you want?" The message disappeared before I even blinked, then fogged into the glass a moment later. To remember. Remember what? No answer came, but that word followed me into my dreams. That night, I dreamed of a second basement door, not the one at the end of the hallway, the one I'd already opened. This one was behind the walls. In the dream, I was peeling away the plaster and drywall with my hands. Fingernails cracked, fingers raw. I could feel the wood behind it, an old frame, a knob, a door with no lock. I woke up sitting on the floor in front of the real wall beneath the window. My hands were bleeding, tiny cuts, splinters, and the wallpaper was torn. No one had ever mentioned there being a crawl space in this room, but now I knew it was there. The next morning, I moved the desk and pried further at the wall. The plaster crumbled easily, as if it had been softened with time. After half an hour, I uncovered something, a wooden panel, rotten, painted over several times, but unmistakably a door. There was no handle, only a carved indentation where fingers once pulled it open. The house made a sound then, not a creak, not a thump. It sighed. I can't explain it better than that. Like the walls exhaled, like it had waited years for someone to notice. My fingers hovered over the indentation. I hesitated. Then the lights in the room flickered. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I opened it. Behind the panel was darkness. Not like the basement, a darkness that stretched deeper, older. I leaned in with my flashlight, expecting dirt or wood framing. Instead, I found stairs. Spiral, descending, covered in dust. Each step carved with tiny marks, scratches, symbols. Some were letters in languages I didn't recognize. Some were tiny gouges, like someone had been dragged downward, resisting. I should have closed it. I should have nailed the wall shut and burned the room, but I couldn't. Something deep in me, curiosity, madness, maybe both, whispered that this place had been waiting for me, that this was mine. I stepped down. The air changed, cooler, heavier. My flashlight flickered just once, then held steady. The walls narrowed as I descended. The stairs twisted in ways that defied logic, like they didn't obey the architecture of the house above. I kept track by counting. 34 steps. Then the ground leveled out. I found myself in a corridor. Brick walls, curved ceiling. It felt more like a tunnel than a basement. And at the end, barely visible in the pale light, was a door. Tall, narrow, made of old, blackened wood, with something carved across the surface. If you see yourself, don't speak. My breath caught in my throat. Suddenly, I heard movement behind the door. Software footsteps coming closer. And then, just as I turned to flee, I heard a voice, my voice, on the other side of the door. It whispered, calm and clear, "Don't leave me down here again." I didn't run. I wanted to, but I didn't. Somewhere between terror and resignation, I simply froze. The voice behind the door, my voice, wasn't shouting or pleading. It was calm, steady. That scared me more than anything. It didn't sound desperate. It sounded certain. Certain that I'd return. Certain that this wasn't the first time, that I'd been here before. "Don't leave me down here again." I stepped back, breath trembling. The tunnel felt narrower than before. The shadows had shape now. Corners where there were no corners. Movements that stopped the second I tried to focus on them. The door didn't open. It didn't have to. It wanted me to be the one to turn the handle. I backed away slowly, counted the steps as I went up. 34 again. At the top, I pulled the hidden panel closed and pressed it shut with my full weight. The sound of the sighing walls returned, lower this time. Almost disappointed. I didn't speak for hours. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, my ears tuned to every creak, every whisper of wind against the windows. At some point, the lights flickered again, but I ignored them. It was night when I finally looked in the mirror again. Not the big mirror in the basement, not the one in my dream, just the little one above the desk. At first, everything looked normal, but as I leaned closer, I realized something horrifying. The reflection wasn't now. I was still in the same position, same clothes, same angle. But in the reflection, I was smiling, a smile that I wasn't making. I leaned away. The reflection remained still for a moment too long, like it was waiting for me to notice. And then it blinked. I didn't blink. It did. I backed away so fast I knocked over the chair. And for a moment, just a moment, the glass shimmered like water, like it was no longer solid. That's when I realized mirrors weren't just showing me what I looked like. They were watching, and they remembered things I didn't. Over the next few days, the messages on the mirror kept appearing. Each morning, a new line. "You left me in the dark." "I remember the other house. You promised you wouldn't forget." And finally, "We were the same once." I stopped sleeping altogether. I kept the lights on at all times, even though they flickered. Even though the bulbs began to buzz with a low, almost electric hum. I stacked books in front of the mirror, pushed furniture against the hidden door in the wall, but none of it helped, because now the dreams were following me into the day. I'd be brushing my teeth, and suddenly I'd look up and see the reflection smiling again. That other me. I'd freeze, and then just as quickly, it would vanish. Normal again. It was eroding me, piece by piece. The worst part wasn't what I saw, it was what I felt. Like something was inside me, remembering things I had forgotten. Regrets. Moments I'd buried. Whispers began to follow me, not just in the vents now, but behind the walls, inside drawers beneath the floorboards. Sometimes I'd hear them when I closed my eyes. They weren't words at first, just sounds, breath, movement. Then I began to understand fragments. "You said you'd come back. You watched me fade. You locked the door behind us." Behind us. What did that mean? I didn't know what was real anymore. One evening, as the rain beat harder against the glass and thunder echoed in the hills, I opened the closet to grab a clean shirt. I found something that hadn't been there before. A coat. Long, black, covered in dust. Not mine. I didn't own anything like it. And inside the pocket, a key, Not to the front door, not the basement, smaller, handwritten on a slip of paper stuffed into the same pocket. Try the room at the top of the house. My building didn't have a top room, just the attic, which I had never dared explore, until now. I pocketed the key, heart beating like a snare drum, and as I stepped into the hallway, the house groaned, this time not in protest, but in welcome. The attic had always made me uneasy, not because I'd seen or heard anything up there. In fact, the opposite. It was too quiet, too still. The hatch in the ceiling of the hallway, just outside the bedroom door, had never moved an inch in the time I'd been here. There was no draft, no creaks, no signs of life. But that night, as the storm outside surged and lightning illuminated the narrow hallway in flashes of pale blue, I stood beneath the hatch, the old coat in one hand and the small, cold key in the other. I didn't know what I expected to find. I only knew that something wanted me to go. It felt like I was being pulled up, as if my body was moving on instructions that weren't entirely mine. The attic hatch was covered in a thin layer of dust. There was no ladder, just an old rope hanging down. I reached up, pulled it once, and to my surprise, the door swung open with a groan. Dust poured down like ash. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at the dark hole above me. Then I climbed. The wooden slats creaked under my weight as I pulled myself into the narrow space. It smelled like dry rot and something metallic. Old iron, maybe. I held up my flashlight and swept the beam across the attic. Empty, except for a door. At the far end of the attic, leaning slightly to the left, was a single door. Narrower than any other in the house. It was built right into the sloped wall, as if the attic had been designed around it, not the other way around. The wood was pale, unfinished. It didn't match anything else in the house. My throat was dry as I walked toward it. The air grew colder with every step. When I reached the door, I tried the knob. Locked. I took the key from the coat pocket and slid it in. A perfect fit. The lock clicked once, loud and final. I hesitated, then opened the door. Inside was a small room, bare wood floors, slanted ceiling. Dust danced in the flashlight beam. There were no windows, no furniture, just a single object sitting in the middle of the room. A mirror, tall, ornate, a different one than the basement. This one was freestanding, framed in twisted black metal, with spiraled edges that curled like vines. It had been covered in a white sheet, now yellowed with age. I stood before it, breath catching in my throat. And then, I pulled the sheet away. My reflection stared back. But it wasn't just me. Behind me, inside the mirror, stood a figure. Close, shadowy, head tilted. I spun around. No one was there. But when I turned back, the figure in the mirror hadn't vanished. It had moved closer. Now it stood directly behind me in the reflection, inches away. I could almost feel the cold of it on the back of my neck. Its face was still hidden, just a silhouette. But it reached forward and raised a hand, placing it against the glass from the inside. A perfect match to mine. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Because I suddenly remembered something. Not a dream, not a hallucination, a memory. A night years ago. Different house, different town. Me in a room that smelled like this, and someone knocking from inside the mirror, begging to be let out. I had walked away that time. I had left. And now whatever was inside had followed me. It had waited. It had grown. And it wanted me to finish what I started. I backed out of the attic, nearly falling down the hatch. I slammed it shut behind me and shoved a chair underneath, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. Downstairs, the mirrors had fogged again, every single one, and on every surface, written in that same scrawled, breathy script, "You knew. You left me there. Now open the last door." I didn't know what the last door was, not yet, but something told me I'd already passed through it once. And something else, something I hadn't dared to admit, was beginning to whisper louder. What if I'm not the original? What if the thing in the mirror is? The next morning, everything in the house was still. No whispers in the walls, no messages on the mirror, just silence. And that terrified me more than the noise ever had. It felt like the calm before a disaster, like whatever had been pushing and prodding me had now stepped back, waiting, watching what I would do next. I stayed in the bedroom until the sun was high, though sunlight barely mattered anymore. It filtered through the rain-soaked windows like milk through water, pale, useless, cold. I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I couldn't bring myself to. I just sat and stared at the mirror over the desk, the one I had long since stopped trusting. But today was different. Today I felt drawn to it again. Like it was calling me, not with fear, but with something colder. Curiosity, maybe guilt. I pulled the cloth away and looked. At first, just me. Tired, pale, sleepless. Then, after a second, I noticed the difference. My reflection was breathing, but I wasn't. It exhaled, fogged the glass slightly. I was holding my breath. The illusion shattered. The thing in the mirror smiled. Not wicked, not cruel. Worse, knowing. Then it moved its lips and spoke. There was no sound, but I understood every word. "You're the one who crossed over." I stumbled back. My foot hit the leg of the chair, sending it skittering across the floor. The reflection didn't follow. It stayed perfectly still, like a photo of a moment that hadn't happened yet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the mirror, but I didn't, because somewhere inside, I already knew it was right. I crossed over, but from where? The attic, the tunnel, or something older? That phrase echoed again. "You promised you wouldn't forget." And then a sharp, splintered thought pierced through me like lightning through bone. This wasn't the first time I'd been in this house. I had been here before, but not like this. Not in this body. I opened the closet. The black coat still hung there, like it had always belonged. I slipped my hands into the pockets again, searching, hoping. I found something tucked deep inside the lining. A photograph, curled at the edges, old, faded. It showed the house, but not the way it looked now. The walls were clean, the windows intact. It looked newer. There were two people standing on the front porch. One of them was me, younger, smiling. But it wasn't the me I saw in the mirror. It was the other one. And the person next to him, the second figure, was blurred as if the film itself had rejected their identity. Just a smear of static, not a camera flaw, but something deliberate, like that face had been scratched out from the other side. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in the same script as the mirror messages, "Only one of us came back." I dropped the photo and staggered back, heart hammering. I wasn't haunted, I was shared. This body, this self, wasn't mine alone, and the other me wanted everything back. I started checking every mirror in the house, the one in the hall, the one in the bathroom, the tall, dusty one behind the guest room door. Each reflection behaved slightly differently now, subtle delays, slight movements that didn't match mine. One of them, just one, spoke again, this time aloud. No breath, no movement, just a sound like splintering glass forming words. "It's almost time." Then silence. My skin felt thin. My thoughts weren't just mine anymore. I began hearing another voice inside my head, one that remembered things I didn't, a voice that whispered through my bones rather than my ears. A memory returned, a long hallway, endless mirrors, someone behind every one of them, each one waiting, each one whispering, "Choose." And I had, but I no longer remembered what. I don't know what the last door is, but I know it's near. And when I find it, I don't think I'll be walking through alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hallway again. Not mine, not this house's. An endless corridor lined with mirrors, stretching on forever, curving gently like the inside of a shell. Each mirror held a version of me, some broken, some wrong. One of them wept, one of them laughed, and one stood perfectly still, hand raised, eyes hollow. I don't know how I knew this, but that one was the original. I woke with the taste of glass in my mouth, like my teeth had been biting something sharp in my sleep. There were no cuts, no blood, just a faint shimmer behind my eyes, like reflection lived inside me now. That morning, the house no longer felt like a house. The walls seemed to breathe. The lights had grown tired of pretending. They flickered in long, rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat, or something pretending to have one. I left the bedroom. My footsteps sounded wrong on the floor, hollow, delayed, as if the house was echoing back the memory of a sound instead of the sound itself. I passed the hallway mirror, stopped, and turned to look. He was there. Me. Not a broken version, not angry, not sad, just waiting. He stared at me, head slightly tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he whispered, "It happened in the lake." The mirror went black. I blinked and found myself halfway down the stairs without remembering how I got there. The lake? I didn't remember a lake, but my hands suddenly did. They ached with cold. Not metaphorical cold, real, bone-crushing cold, as if they'd once gripped something beneath the surface for too long. I opened the back door. It was raining again, more like a heavy mist now, fog curling across the ground, and behind the house, past the twisted trees and the iron fence, I saw it for the first time. A path. A narrow one I swear had never been there before. I followed it. It led down a slope I didn't remember ever walking. And then, past the brambles and the dead birch trees, I saw it. The lake. Still. Black. Vast. Its surface was smooth like obsidian, but it gave off no reflection. Not of me, not of the sky, not of anything. Just depth and silence. And a memory rose. A moment that didn't belong to this life, but pressed itself into my skull anyway. Me, standing at the lake's edge at night. Another version of me, kneeling in the water, eyes wide, holding something. A body. No, a mirror. And then whispering, "One of us has to stay." And I had chosen. But now, standing on the shore, I didn't know which one I had been. The one who stayed, or the one who left. The fog thickened. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, no one was there. Only the trail of wet footprints leading right up to where I stood. My own footprints, walking toward me. But I hadn't moved. I ran, back to the house, locked the door, every door. Back in the bedroom, I opened the closet one more time, praying the coat and photo were still there. They were gone. In their place was something new, a shard of glass, thin, curved, almost like a piece of a mirror. My reflection in the shard was warped. It looked like me, but it was smiling. And behind that smile, I saw something I couldn't unsee. The lake, the mirror, the moment I crossed over. Only now. I wasn't sure I ever really came back. The house had changed again. I felt it as soon as I opened my eyes the next morning. The air was wrong, denser, heavier, as though it had been breathed too many times before. The walls seemed narrower, the ceiling lower. The entire structure creaked like it was settling into something else, or someone else. I got up slowly. My legs felt stiff, like they belonged to someone who had been walking for days. I splashed cold water on my face. The reflection didn't follow this time. I stared at the mirror, waiting to see myself move, but it was empty. Just the bathroom behind me. No image, no shadow. And then, slowly, the reflection walked into frame, not from behind me, from inside the mirror. It turned its head and looked at me with a tilt of recognition. Then it raised its hand and pointed, to the left, toward the hallway. I turned, and there it was, a door, new. Or maybe old, but hidden until now. It stood at the very end of the hall where there had only ever been wall, tall, narrow, and jet black, with no handle, just a keyhole. I don't know how I knew, but I felt it in my stomach. This was the last door. I approached every step feeling like it echoed through some deeper part of the house, maybe even through time. The air grew colder. The hallway stretched. My thoughts tangled. The lights flickered and then went out entirely. Darkness, but not silence. A voice, low and impossibly close to my ear, whispered, "Turn the key. See who you really are." I reached into my pocket. I didn't remember putting the key there, but it was there. Heavy, cold, familiar. I inserted it into the lock. The door breathed. That's the only word I can use. It exhaled a warm, damp gust of air, like a creature asleep for too long, and then it opened. Behind the door was a spiral staircase, stone, descending, too far down for a house this size. I hesitated, but I stepped inside. Each step down felt like walking into memory. Not mine, but someone's. I smelled smoke, blood, old perfume, wet leaves, and something sterile, like a hospital hallway with the lights turned off. The stairs ended at another door. Wooden, familiar, identical to my bedroom door upstairs. I opened it, and I was standing in my bedroom, but not this one. Everything was reversed, like a mirror version of the space I knew. The window was on the wrong wall. The bed faced the opposite way. The closet door opened left instead of right, and sitting on the bed was me, not moving, just watching. His eyes were red-rimmed, sleepless. He looked older, worn. He looked tired of being trapped. We stared at each other for a long time. Then he said in my exact voice, "You were never supposed to survive the crossing." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He stood slowly, the floorboards creaking under his bare feet. "You took something that wasn't yours," he said. "My place, my time, my name. You left me behind to rot in the dark." I backed away. "I didn't know." "Yes, you did." His smile was small, sad. "But you forgot, and forgetting is the worst kind of betrayal." The room began to flicker like a dying bulb. "You've lived half a life," he whispered. "Now give it back." And then he stepped into me. I didn't fall. I didn't move. But suddenly I wasn't alone in my own head anymore. He was inside, alive, and he remembered everything. And now, so did I. I didn't scream. I couldn't. There was no room in my lungs for air, no space for my own voice. I was frozen, rooted to the spot, unable to move, trapped inside my own body. His presence filled me. It crawled beneath my skin, thrummed through my veins, and lodged itself in the darkest parts of my mind. A part of me wanted to fight, to push him out, but I couldn't remember how to. He had taken over, but I wasn't gone, at least not completely. I could feel the flickering of my own thoughts beneath his, a whispering, desperate plea to return, to reclaim my place. But each time I tried, it felt like I was sinking deeper into a quicksand of memory and emotion. Memories that weren't mine, a house I'd never lived in, a lake that hadn't existed until yesterday, a door I hadn't opened until moments ago. He made me see them all again, clearer now. The forgotten memories that were his, our memories, the moments that blurred the lines between us and him, between me and the reflection. He was the one who had walked through the door. He was the one who had lived in that house before me, the one who had made that choice at the lake. He was the one who had given up his place, his life in exchange for something else, something he thought would set him free. But the truth was, none of us were ever free. I looked around the room. No, this mirror room, the air thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and something older than the house itself. The bed seemed to grow larger, the walls pressing in as I tried to focus on the reality around me. I heard him inside my head again, not as a voice, but as a memory. "You weren't supposed to find the door. You weren't supposed to wake me." My hands shook as I reached out for the edge of the bed to steady myself. My vision blurred as my body fought for control. The mirror in front of me, my reflection, was no longer just an image. It was a place, a space. It had substance. And there, inside it, I saw him. The man who had been me, the version of myself who had crossed over, who had stepped into the lake, and who had left his life behind to return, to become me. We were standing together now, in the same room, separated by nothing but the glass. "You've seen too much," he murmured, though his lips didn't move. The words slipped inside my mind as if they had always been there. "Now you can't escape." I wanted to scream again, to wake up, but the room was alive in a way I couldn't explain. The floor creaked beneath my feet, like it was testing my weight, my presence. The mirrors began to shift, move, as if they were alive, twisting around, pulling me closer to them. The reflection in the mirror moved again, but not in sync with me. His hands lifted, and I could feel mine mirror his. My movements were slow, as if my body didn't recognize me anymore. But then, something snapped. The glass in front of me cracked, not with the sound of shattering, but with a soft, knowing pressure, like something ancient being uncovered. A sliver of light crawled through the crack, and suddenly I could hear voices, whispers from within the mirror, soft at first, but then growing louder. "One of us must stay," they said in unison. The voice was mine, but not. I recognized it, but it didn't belong to me anymore. "One of us must return." My heart raced. A part of me wanted to pull away from the mirror, to step back and run, but my feet were rooted in place. It was happening again. The storm outside had returned, and I could hear the wind howling through the walls. But it was muted now. The real storm was within me, within the house, in the mirrors. I looked back at the reflection, the other me, and he smiled. "You'll understand soon enough," he said softly, his lips curling into something dark, almost sad. "You never really left." The crack in the mirror widened, and from within it, I saw something shift. Another version of me, standing just beyond the glass. His features were less distinct, blurred, but his eyes were black holes that pulled at me, beckoning me forward. I couldn't stop myself. Without thinking, without wanting to, my feet moved toward the glass, toward him, toward myself. I reached out to touch the cold surface, the cracks spreading like veins beneath my fingertips. And as my hand made contact, the room shifted. The ground beneath me tilted, and suddenly, there was no longer a mirror in front of me. There was only the darkness of the hallway stretching infinitely ahead. I had crossed the threshold, and now I was him. The hallway grew longer, the space narrowing. The walls pushed in, and everything became harder to see. The lights flickered again, more violently this time. But the worst part was the voice that had been inside me, whispering all along, now growing louder. "You were never meant to come back," it said, and I realized then, this was my life. This was always my life, from the beginning. A life built on borrowed time, a borrowed soul, a borrowed body, and it would never be mine again. The hallway stretched endlessly, warping like the inside of a tunnel. My footsteps echoed as I walked. No, moved, forward. I could hear the faint sound of the wind howling, but it sounded distant, almost as though I were hearing it through thick glass. I had crossed through the mirror, crossed the threshold into... what? Into another world? Or had I only ever been in this one? A door appeared ahead of me, its edges jagged, as if it were unfinished, incomplete. It felt wrong. Nothing in this house had ever felt right. But this door, this one felt like a fracture, a scar in the fabric of reality itself. It was black, but not like the other doors. This one was alive, shifting in the shadows, pulsating as if it had a heartbeat. I could hear it, faintly, thrumming in my chest, syncing with the rhythm of my own pulse. I stopped in front of it, unsure whether to open it, but then I couldn't stop myself. My hand reached for the doorknob, cold to the touch, and twisted. There was no sound, no creaking. It simply opened. Inside, I saw nothing, just a void, and I stepped into it. The moment I did, the door slammed shut behind me, and the world shifted violently, like a record skipping in the middle of a song. The air grew heavy, thick with static. The darkness seemed to press against me, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Instead, I felt familiar, comfortable, as though this place was meant for me, meant for us. A whisper rose from the shadows, a voice that seemed to live in the air itself. "Welcome home." I stood there still, feeling the weight of those words sink into me. They were mine, but not. They belonged to the version of me who had lived in this space, who had always lived in this space, But who was I now? A question I couldn't answer. A question I didn't need to answer anymore. The dark seemed to breathe. It moved around me, wrapping around my body like a blanket, soft and suffocating all at once. I felt his presence, my presence, pressing closer, filling the space between my thoughts, becoming part of me again. The reflection, the version of me that had been lost. And the room was his. It was mine. I looked down at my hands. They were still my hands, but they didn't feel like mine. They felt worn, tired, like hands that had lived too many lives, too many iterations. A voice, soft and thick, rose in the darkness again. You were never supposed to forget. The words were like a punch to my chest. They rattled me, shook the very core of who I thought I was. My heart thudded heavily. My breath caught in my throat. We are the same, always have been. I clenched my fists, the sensation of something unseen pushing against me, trying to overwhelm me. I could feel the walls of the void closing in, but there was no escape. Not now, not when I had crossed through this door. The dark shimmered, distorting. And then something in the space twisted, bending reality. The ground beneath me cracked open. From the crack, a figure began to rise. Slowly at first, then quicker, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. It was me, but it wasn't. It was him, the other me. The one who had never left. The one who had stayed. The one I had tried to bury. The one who had crawled from the depths of the lake. The one who had crossed over before I ever did. And he was smiling. That same dark smile I had seen in the reflection. That same smile I had seen in the glass when I touched it. But now it wasn't just a smile. It was a scream. He opened his mouth and the sound that came out was a sound I recognized too well. It was the sound of my own voice. You were never meant to come back, he whispered. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But there was no fight left in me. There was nothing but the sound of his voice filling my mind. No air left to breathe. Just the suffocating truth of what I had done. I had taken his place. I had stolen his life. And now he was taking mine. I reached out, trying to grab hold of something, anything, but all I could grasp was the darkness. It flowed through me, twisting in my chest, in my lungs, in my very bones. You were never supposed to remember. And then I understood. He hadn't crossed over to this side. He hadn't taken my life. No, he had never left. I had come to him. I had taken his place in the living world, and he had been waiting for me to remember, waiting for me to unlock the door. And now he was the one who would take everything from me. He stepped forward, and I could feel him inside me again. The part of me I had tried to bury, the other side of the coin. And in that moment, I knew. This was never my life. I had been the one who crossed over, the one who had stolen it. And now the door was closing behind me, shutting out the world I had once known. I was lost. I was his. The other me, the one who had been buried, forgotten, or perhaps never forgotten, was inside me again, filling me, becoming me. I felt the sharp sting of my own thoughts becoming twisted, warped, as if I were looking into a fractured mirror. My identity, the thing I had held on to for so long, slipped through my fingers like sand. The more I tried to hold on to it, the faster it faded. The air around me felt heavier now, as though the very space I occupied was closing in around me. My heart pounded in my chest, a constant reminder that I was still human, still alive. But everything else, the walls, the shifting darkness, the figure that was slowly walking toward me, no longer felt real. It was as if reality itself was slipping, fraying at the edges like a torn cloth. The space around me bent, flickering in and out of focus, like the unreliable hum of a broken light bulb. And yet, even in the chaos, we kept moving forward. Each step I took felt like it wasn't mine. I wasn't me anymore. Not entirely. I had become a hollow thing, a vessel filled with something ancient, something that had never fully left. The shadow, the other version of myself, was right behind me. I could feel his presence pressing against my back, so close, so suffocating. His breath was warm, wet, as if his very existence were part of me now. But I could still feel myself, buried deep within, faint, fading. "You can't escape me," he whispered, his voice blending with mine. "You've crossed the line. There's nowhere left to hide." I wanted to scream, to claw my way out of this nightmare, to escape this house, this twisted version of myself that had been dragging me into the abyss. But the more I struggled, the more I realized this wasn't a nightmare. This was my reality. This was where I belonged. His hand, the hand that wasn't mine, but was, pressed against my chest, and I could feel the warmth of it seep into my skin, deep into my bones. His touch was a reminder of everything I had forgotten, everything I had abandoned to step into his life. I fell to my knees, my head spinning, my vision flickering between this world and something else. The air around me smelled like decay, like the smell of old, forgotten things buried beneath the earth. I looked up. The room, the space I was in, was shifting again, its walls stretching out, bending and folding like paper. Nothing was solid anymore. It all melted together, becoming one with the darkness. The darkness, it had always been here. It had always been part of me. "You've been here before?" he said, his voice growing louder, more insistent. "This is the place where we end. This is where we meet again." I closed my eyes, trying to block him out. But his words, his presence, wrapped around me, squeezing tighter, pulling me deeper into the abyss. This wasn't just about him. This was about us. Two halves of the same broken soul. Two lives that had collided. And now we were the same. I opened my eyes again. In the shifting shadows ahead, I saw a figure. It wasn't me, but it was familiar. Someone I had forgotten. Someone I hadn't seen in years. It was her, my mother, but she wasn't real. I blinked and the vision was gone. A cold rush of dread washed over me. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified, but the sense of something wrong lingered, pressing against me like a suffocating weight. I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. The room, or what was left of it, began to shrink. The walls squeezed inward, the ceiling lowering, and the space between me and the door became distant, unreachable. The voice, the other me, spoke again, his tone a low growl now. "You can't go back." And I realized it then. There was no going back. The house, the door, the place, they weren't real anymore. They were just echoes, a distortion. The house wasn't just a place, it was a prison, a cage built to hold us both. And the only way out was forward. I stepped forward. But the door that had once been in front of me was gone, replaced by a reflection of me, the broken me, the one who had walked through the door, the one who had been forgotten, the one who had never truly crossed over. And now in the reflection, I saw what was left of me, a hollow shell, a shattered mask. But I wasn't alone. The other me, the real me, stood next to me. He didn't smile this time. His eyes were hollow and his face was twisted with something like sorrow. "I never left," he whispered, and his voice was no longer an echo. It was my own. I reached out. I had to reach out, to grasp something solid, something real. But my hand passed through him, and in the space where I had been, there was only the dark, the cold, and the empty. I woke up, but I wasn't sure if I was really awake. The air was cold and the walls around me felt wrong. They pressed in like they were closing up on me. I could hear my breath, ragged and shallow, but everything else was quiet, too quiet, a silence that weighed down on me, thick and suffocating. Where was I? What had happened? I looked around. The room I was in wasn't the mirror room from before, but it wasn't the place I had known either. The walls were the same color, faded, sickly yellow, peeling with age, but there was something different, something off about the way the shadows clung to the corners. The atmosphere was wrong, like it was being seen through the lens of a memory, blurred and warped. I pushed myself up from the floor, my body feeling heavy, sluggish, as though I were dragging myself through a dream. I tried to steady myself, but the room spun, tilting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Everything around me felt familiar in the wrong way. like a home I used to know, but one I couldn't remember living in. I stumbled toward the door, my hand grazing the wall for balance. The smooth texture of the wallpaper felt like a lie. It wasn't just the peeling paint or the dusty floors. There was something deeper, something unseen beneath it all. I reached for the doorknob, but before I could turn it, I heard it. A voice. It wasn't mine. Not exactly. "You never left." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. The words were like a crack in the air, breaking the fragile silence. The voice echoed in the pit of my stomach, vibrating through my chest. I turned around slowly, and there, standing in the center of the room, was the mirror. But it wasn't just a mirror. It was a door, a portal, a gateway. I could see myself in the reflection, but I wasn't alone. The other me stood beside me, my shadow, my twin. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, staring at me with a hollow expression. "We are the same," he said, his voice a ghostly whisper that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "You can't escape me. I am you. You are me." I backed away from the mirror, panic rising in my chest. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. But then, the reflection moved. His eyes followed me, never blinking. His mouth moved in slow, deliberate motions. "We've always been one," he whispered. "I'm the part you tried to forget, the part you left behind." I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, thudding so loudly I thought it might break through my ribs. I turned back to the door, desperate to escape. But as I reached for the knob again, I felt it. A sudden, intense pressure on my chest, like invisible hands were gripping me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gasped for breath, but it wasn't enough. The air felt thick, suffocating. The voice echoed again, this time louder, as if it were all around me. "You can never escape what you are. You were born to return here, to face me." I stumbled back, falling to the floor, gasping. My fingers scrambled against the floor, feeling for something, anything, to ground myself. The floor beneath me felt soft, almost alive, shifting like a tide. My hands sunk into it, sinking deeper and deeper as the walls around me began to close in again. It was like I was drowning in a flood of memories, each one more fragmented than the last. The room wasn't just a room anymore. It was a reflection of my mind, a shattered mirror of my thoughts and experiences, each piece jagged and incomplete. I saw flashes of my past flickering like old film, a house I hadn't lived in, a street I didn't recognize, a face I should have known but couldn't remember. Faces that had vanished from my life, now distorted, twisted, and staring back at me from the shadows. And then there was the lake. I had seen it before. I had walked past it, stood at its edge, felt its cold embrace, but I hadn't crossed it. I hadn't drowned in it. Had I? The memories were wrong. They were incomplete. They were fractured. Like a shattered glass, each piece held part of the truth, but none of it was whole. "You never left," the voice whispered again, louder this time, coming from all directions. "You can't escape me. You can't escape the truth." I felt my fingers digging into the floor, my nails scraping against the wood, trying to hold on, to stay grounded. But the darkness was too strong. It wrapped around me, tugging at my limbs, pulling me deeper into the void. And then, the reflection in the mirror changed. It wasn't just the other me standing there anymore. The reflection was warped, distorted beyond recognition, twisted into something else, something monstrous. The figure's face was melting, its features stretching unnaturally, its mouth opening wide to reveal rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It lunged at me, but as I closed my eyes in terror, the world snapped. The sensation was like a sudden plunge, as though I had been yanked from one reality and dropped into another. The pressure on my chest disappeared. The dark, suffocating weight lifted, and when I opened my eyes, I was standing in the middle of the hallway again, the same hallway from before. It was different now, though, warped. The walls stretched and twisted like the walls of a house that had been forgotten, long abandoned. The light flickered like a dying flame. and the air smelled of decay. Everything was falling apart. I wasn't alone. I could hear footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, growing louder with each passing second. And then I turned. There was no one there, but I could still feel him, the other me, the one who had never truly left, the one who had always been with me. I was no longer just running from a house. I wasn't running from a mirror or from a door. I was running from myself. I ran, not because I could escape, because I knew deep down that I couldn't, but because I needed to do something. Anything. I needed to feel control, even if it was just an illusion. My feet pounded against the worn wooden floor, each step echoing in the hollow emptiness of the house. The shadows stretched long, curling around the corners, reaching toward me like fingers, dragging the light further and further away. The hallway twisted, like the very walls were alive, shifting with each step I took. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. I had to find the truth, or at least something that would make this madness stop. I could feel him behind me, that presence, that thing that was both me and not me, the reflection that haunted every corner of my mind, pushing against the walls of reality, making them crack and crumble. He was always there, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. "You can't escape," his voice whispered in my ear, so close it felt like he was right next to me, breathing down my neck. I forced myself to turn, to look, but when I did, nothing. Nothing but the dark, the empty hallway stretching infinitely in both directions. I gasped, taking in deep breaths, my chest tight. I felt the walls closing in. There was no way forward, no way back. Only him and me, always together, always the same. I stumbled, my legs giving way beneath me, and I fell to my knees. The cold wood dug into my skin as I braced myself against the floor. The world around me felt warped, like a mirror, reflecting back a version of me that wasn't mine. It was a dream, but not a dream, a nightmare, more real than anything. I clutched my head, trying to make sense of it. The memories were slipping away faster now, like sand in an hourglass. The house wasn't just shifting, it was disintegrating, coming apart piece by piece. The walls that once held me felt like they were made of glass, fragile, shattering with every passing second. "You know what you are," his voice again. "You know the truth. You've always known." I screamed, not in fear, but in frustration. The anger, the terror. It was all mixing together. A boiling pot that was threatening to overflow. But I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape him. I slammed my hands against the floor, trying to push myself up to stand, but it was as though the very ground was pulling me back, holding me down. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the air suffocating, thick with a weight that felt like the whole world pressing down on me. And then, there it was, the door, the same door I had seen earlier, when I had first crossed into this house. But now it was different. The edges were frayed, the wood splintered. It looked like it had been here forever, but it hadn't. It was new. It was an illusion, a trick, a path to nowhere. I reached for the door, my fingers trembling as I wrapped them around the handle. But just before I could turn it, the reflection appeared in the glass. The figure, he, was standing there, grinning at me from the other side, his hollow eyes locked onto mine. "It's too late," he said, his voice a cruel mockery of my own. "You've come too far." I yanked the door open, desperate to get away. But as the door creaked wide, I felt it. Cold fingers wrapping around my wrist, pulling me back. It was him. He had crossed over into this world, into my world. And now he wasn't just a reflection. He was real. I fought, trying to wrench myself free. But the grip was iron, stronger than mine. He pulled me back toward him, dragging me into the suffocating darkness. "You think you can escape?" he snarled, his voice low and guttural. "You think you can outrun me?" I struggled, panic surging through my chest, but it was no use. His grip tightened, his fingers digging into my skin. The darkness swallowed me whole, and then there was only nothing. The air was thick with the stench of rot and decay. I could barely see, barely breathe. The floor beneath me was wet, damp like the bottom of a lake. I reached out, my fingers brushing against something cold, slick. Water. I gasped, coughing as I pushed myself up, my hands shaking. I felt something hard against my back. A wall, a door. The cold, damp earth pressed against me, the air thick and suffocating. I opened my eyes, blinking through the darkness, trying to make sense of it. And then I saw it. The reflection. But it wasn't in a mirror this time. It was in the water, rippling, distorted, but unmistakable. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. It was his, the other me. He was grinning at me, his eyes wide with malice, his mouth twisted into a smile that wasn't right. And then the water began to move. Not in waves, not in ripples, but in something worse, something alive. The water surged forward, crashing against me, pulling me down. I tried to scream, but the water filled my mouth, choking me, drowning me in the same nightmare I had been running from. His laugh echoed in the darkness, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the depths of my mind. "You can't escape the truth," he whispered, his voice a haunting lullaby that filled the space. "You never left." And then the world went black. When I opened my eyes again, the darkness was gone. At least it appeared to be. The air was lighter now. The oppressive weight of the house, the crushing suffocation, lifted as if the world had taken a deep, reluctant breath. But the relief was short-lived. Something was still off, as if the world had changed. Just enough to make me doubt everything I thought I knew. The space I was in was familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was like a dream that you can't quite remember, but you know you've had before. I stood up slowly, feeling the cold earth beneath my feet, the wet, damp ground seeping into my shoes. The scent of old wood and wet leaves hung in the air, mixing with the faint, lingering smell of something decayed. Where was I? I looked around, my senses heightened, every little detail sharp in my mind. I wasn't in the house anymore. I was outside. The forest stretched endlessly before me. Thick trees loomed, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands, blocking the view of the sky. A pale light filtered through the leaves, but it wasn't natural. It was wrong, casting everything in an eerie, washed-out hue. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. In fact, it felt strangely familiar. I took a step forward, then another. The forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no rustling of animals in the underbrush, just the whispering of wind through the leaves, a sound that felt more like a low hum, the murmur of something not quite alive. It was as though I were walking through a memory, one that didn't belong to me, a place I couldn't recall, yet my feet knew the way. I wasn't alone. The presence I had felt before, the one that followed me no matter where I went, was here too. Its shadow pressed against my back, weighing me down. I felt him behind me, that other me, but this time he was different. He was quieter, and the stillness made him worse. I continued forward, drawn to something, but I wasn't sure what. There was an invisible pull, something calling me deeper into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and I found my thoughts becoming sluggish, heavy, as though my mind was being slowly drained by the very ground beneath me. The trees parted ahead, revealing a clearing, and there, in the center of that clearing, was an old house. The sight of it froze me in my tracks. The structure was dilapidated, falling apart from years of neglect. The wood was darkened and warped, the windows shattered, some of the panes missing altogether. The door hung open, creaking in the wind. And yet, even in its ruined state, the house felt familiar. I had seen it before. I had been inside it. I felt my breath catch in my throat as my mind reeled. This house, this place, was part of me, part of whatever nightmare I had been trapped in. I had known this place once, and now it was pulling me back in. I stepped forward, my feet heavy as I moved toward the house, unable to resist its call. It felt like something inside me was waking, calling me back to this spot. The same pull that had led me through the forest, leading me now to the door that had been waiting for me. I stepped inside. The door creaked loudly as I entered, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was familiar, faintly sweet but wrong. A mix of damp earth and old paper, a staleness that clung to the air. The interior of the house was dim, the air thick with the weight of the past. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I moved, each step echoing in the emptiness. Dust hung in the air like smoke, and the walls, once painted in warm, comforting colors, were now faded and peeling. But something was off. The silence wasn't normal. It was like the house was waiting for me to do something. The floors groaned beneath me, as if in protest. But I couldn't stop moving. I had to keep going. I had to face whatever this was. I had to know what was happening to me. I walked through the hallways, the familiar coldness of the place sinking into my bones. Every room I passed seemed to call out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to look inside. I felt like I was being led toward something inevitable, and then I found it. The room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and the dim light from the window spilled through, casting long, stretched shadows across the floor. I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the room was just as I remembered. The bed, the furniture, the old rocking chair that creaked even in the stillness. It was exactly as it had been before, but there was something more now, something in the air that made it feel different. I looked at the bed, and I saw it, the reflection, but not in a mirror this time. It was standing there in the bed, staring at me with those hollow eyes. The other me. He was smiling. "You're home now," he whispered, his voice smooth, like the rustle of dead leaves in the wind. "We've always been here." I felt my heart stop in my chest. He was me. He wasn't a reflection anymore. He wasn't a shadow. He was real. The truth I had been running from was standing in front of me, and it wasn't something I could escape. It had been with me all along. "You can't escape yourself," he said again, his grin widening, pulling further, like it was stretching, growing. And I realized then, I hadn't just been running from a house or from the memories. I had been running from me. The door slammed shut behind me, and the room grew darker. The door slammed shut with a deafening crack, sending vibrations through my entire body. I spun around, my heart racing, but the room I had just entered felt different now, darker, heavier. The air was thick, pressing down on my chest as though the walls themselves were breathing in time with me. I turned back to face him, the other me, the one who had haunted every corner of my mind, every inch of this forsaken place. He was still sitting on the bed, the grin still stretched across his face, that sickeningly familiar grin that had never felt like my own. His hollow eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, unfeeling. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The weight of the truth was suffocating. "You can't outrun me," he said, his voice smooth. But there was something wrong with it, something distorted, as though the sound itself had been twisted beyond recognition. It felt like it was coming from inside my skull, rattling my very thoughts. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat felt tight, like it was closing up, as if my own body was refusing to let me voice the horror that was rising within me. "We are one," he continued, his voice growing louder, closer. "You can't escape what you are. You've always known that." I took a step back, my hands shaking. The room around me seemed to ripple, like it wasn't solid anymore, like the edges were becoming unreal, shifting in and out of focus. My mind was unraveling, each thread slipping further from my grasp. I looked at the walls, the peeling wallpaper, the cracked plaster, the broken windows letting in thin slivers of light. But it wasn't just the room that felt wrong. It was the time itself, the way the shadows moved, the way the air tasted like decay. I was losing myself. "You're not real," I finally managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "None of this is real." He laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound, one that sent ice through my veins. "You think you can deny me?" he sneered. "You think you can wake up from this nightmare? We are the same, you and I. There is no waking up. This is your reality now." The room began to spin. My head felt light, dizzy, like I was being pulled into a void. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were burning as I tried to fill them with air, but it wasn't enough. I stumbled, my legs giving way beneath me. My vision blurred, the edges of the room fracturing like shattered glass. But just as I thought I might collapse, the floor beneath me solidified. The spinning stopped. The darkness that had been consuming me receded. I opened my eyes, and I was back in the hallway. The same hallway. The one that had never ended. The one I had been running through, searching for an escape that never came. The walls were crumbling. The light flickered weakly overhead. But there was something else now. Something new. A door. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew that door. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't broken. It wasn't a memory or a reflection. It was real. Solid. An entry to something beyond. Something that held the answers I was desperate for. I couldn't resist. I couldn't run anymore. I reached for the handle, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. It felt alive under my touch, like the door was breathing with me, waiting for me to open it. I twisted the handle and the door creaked open. And there, standing in the room beyond, was the reflection. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, there was a mirror. Not like the shattered ones I had seen before, but a large, pristine mirror, reflecting the room in perfect clarity. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The air in here was still, quiet, heavy. I approached the mirror, my reflection staring back at me with a twisted smile. "You've always known," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "You never left. We've always been together." I could feel the truth pressing in on me, squeezing my chest until I couldn't breathe. The image in the mirror began to distort, the reflection stretching and warping, the edges blurring like ink bleeding in water. I reached out, my hand shaking as I touched the cold glass. And suddenly everything stopped. The reflection froze, the room fell silent, and I felt it. Something inside me snapped, like a thread finally breaking. I wasn't just standing in front of the mirror anymore. I was inside it. I looked around, panic rising in my throat as I realized the room wasn't just a reflection, it was part of the mirror. I was trapped in it, trapped in a version of reality that wasn't mine. I turned to face the reflection of myself, my heart racing. The other me, he was smiling again, but this time there was no malice in it. There was only understanding. "It's over," he whispered softly, his voice warm now, familiar. "You've come home." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. My body was too tired to fight. The truth was too much to bear. The confusion, the fear, it all merged together into a numbness that I couldn't escape. And as the room around me began to fade into the mirror, I realized I wasn't running from a house anymore. I wasn't running from a shadow or a reflection. I was running from myself, and I had nowhere left to go. I tried to move, to step away from the mirror, but it felt like I was frozen in place. The world around me was slipping, fading like a fog receding at dawn. The reflection of myself, the other me, was still smiling. That same twisted grin stretching wider, his eyes burning with a knowledge I could not grasp. I reached out to touch the glass again, feeling the cold, unyielding surface beneath my fingertips. But this time it wasn't cold. It was warm, alive. The mirror throbbed like a heartbeat, and I felt my pulse synchronize with it, like the reflection and I were connected by some invisible thread. A low, guttural sound began to rise from the depths of my mind, a murmur that grew louder with every passing second until it filled the room, vibrating through my very bones. It was his voice, the other me, but it wasn't just his voice. It was all of us, a chorus of whispered truths that had always been buried, locked away deep within. "You're here now," he said softly. "It's time to face it. Time to face what you really are." The words felt like a weight crashing down on me, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I felt my knees buckle beneath me, the ground beneath me becoming soft and shifting as if it were made of liquid. I collapsed. But when I hit the ground, I didn't feel pain. There was no impact, no harsh slap of the floor beneath me. Instead, I sank deeper, as if the very ground was absorbing me, pulling me into itself. The air thickened, and the room around me seemed to twist, the walls stretching and bending in ways they shouldn't. It wasn't a house anymore. It wasn't a forest. It wasn't even a mirror. It was a place where the rules didn't apply, a place where everything and nothing existed at once, where reality could be bent, shaped, and reformed with a single thought. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing, but when I opened them again, the world had changed. The mirror was gone. In its place, there was something worse. I was no longer standing in the room, no longer in the forest, no longer in the house. I was in a void, a dark space with no boundaries, no walls, no floor. The air was thick with static, a buzzing hum that rang in my ears, drowning out every other sound. And then I saw it, a shadow in the distance moving toward me. At first it was just a silhouette, a dark figure that was hard to make out. But as it drew closer, I saw the familiar outline. It was him, the other me. But this time, there was something new. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was blank, expressionless, like a mask that had been ripped away. His eyes, though, they were different, hollow, empty, like the absence of a soul. "Do you see it now?" he asked, his voice low and distant, reverberating through the void. "Do you see the truth?" I opened my mouth to speak, to ask him what he meant, but no words came out. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The darkness was swallowing me whole, pulling me in with every second that passed. And then I realized, the silence, the stillness, it wasn't real. This place, it wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a mirror. It was my mind. I had been here before, hadn't I? This dark, endless space. The place where my thoughts twisted and broke. The place where reality shattered and left nothing behind. This was the truth I had been avoiding all along. This wasn't a house. This wasn't a forest. This wasn't even me. This was the prison I had built for myself. I took a step forward, my legs unsteady, but the ground beneath me gave way again. The void was pulling me back into its cold, endless depths. I clawed at the air, desperate to hold on to something, anything, but the darkness was too strong. "Let go," he whispered, his voice now coming from everywhere, from every direction. "Let go of what you think you know. Let go of everything." The words were like a command, and I felt my body obeying, my mind unraveling further. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand answers, but my voice had been stolen. I was alone in this place, alone with the reflection of myself. And then it happened. The darkness began to shift. It didn't just bend, it ripped open. A crack appeared in the void, a jagged tear in the fabric of this fractured world. Through it, I could see something beyond, a sliver of light, a world outside this nightmare. And then I understood. This place wasn't the end. It wasn't the final destination. It was just the beginning of my descent, the beginning of the truth. "You've always been here," the other me said, his voice cold, final. "You've always known. You've always been running from it." I looked at the crack in the void, the sliver of light growing brighter, pulling me toward it. I wanted to move toward it. I wanted to escape, but I couldn't because I was the darkness. And no matter how hard I tried, I could never escape myself. I couldn't move, not in the way I wanted to. The light that had appeared through the crack in the void felt like a beacon, pulling me toward it with a force I couldn't resist. But even as I reached for it, my body felt like it was being pulled away, dragged down into the depths of the darkness that had consumed me for so long. The void was alive, breathing with me, surrounding me. Its silence was deafening, its coldness suffocating. I could feel my mind starting to stretch, to unravel like the threads of a broken tapestry. It was the place where reality broke down, the place where everything untrue lived, where the twisted versions of myself and my fears had gathered to feed on my thoughts. I wasn't just trapped in a nightmare anymore. I was trapped in my own mind. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the oppressive weight of it all, the light, the darkness, the reflection that had never left me. Every single thought, every fragment of memory was tangled together in a chaotic knot that I couldn't untangle. But the light kept pulling me relentlessly. I opened my eyes again, staring at the jagged crack in the void. The edges were flickering, shifting, as though reality itself was trying to mend, trying to hold together what had long since fallen apart. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. I took a step toward the crack, my feet moving on their own, the pull growing stronger. Each step felt heavier, like I was sinking deeper into the darkness with every movement. "Do you really think you can escape?" The voice came again, this time from everywhere. His voice, the other me. It was all-encompassing, like the air itself was filled with it. I paused, my mind reeling. I had to escape. I had to. This place wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the longer I stood there, the more the truth started to settle in. The truth that I couldn't outrun. "You are me," he continued, his words creeping into my mind like poison. "You can't escape your own thoughts, your own darkness. The longer you resist, the deeper you go. We're one, remember?" I closed my eyes, shaking my head, trying to push the voice away, trying to ignore the crushing reality that was threatening to swallow me whole. But it was impossible. The truth had always been inside me, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break free. The more I fought it, the more it consumed me. It wasn't just a fear anymore. It wasn't just a reflection or a shadow. It was me. I stepped forward again, this time with more certainty. The crack in the void was now wide enough to fit through. It was no longer just a sliver of light. It was a doorway, a way out of this nightmare. But I knew deep down that even if I passed through it, I would never escape. "Go ahead," the voice said, its tone softer now. "You're only running from yourself." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, as I stepped closer to the crack. It was a way out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I would be stepping into something far worse. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched the edge of the crack, feeling the warmth of the light bleed through the darkness. A jolt of fear shot through me, but I pushed it aside. I had to move forward. The moment my fingers brushed the crack, the void around me seemed to shudder. The light from the crack began to pulse, and the air grew thick with an oppressive pressure. And then everything snapped. A blinding flash of light engulfed me, and for a moment I was weightless. I could feel my body stretching, expanding, as though I were being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. My vision blurred and I lost all sense of time. All I knew was that I was being taken somewhere beyond this broken space, beyond the limits of my own mind. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded, the pull stopped. I opened my eyes again. I was no longer in the void. I wasn't in the house. I wasn't in the forest. I wasn't in the mirror. I was standing in an open field, the grass swaying gently in the breeze. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over everything. It was beautiful, peaceful. But something wasn't right. I turned around slowly, and there it was. The house, the same house from before, the one I had been running from, the one that had started all of this. It stood in the distance, waiting for me. I could feel its presence even from here, the familiar heaviness, the suffocating air. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, drawn back toward it, like a moth to a flame. And then, just as I was about to move toward it, I heard the voice again. "You can't escape this." It was quieter now, but the words still echoed in my mind. I wasn't free. I wasn't anywhere near being free. I was still trapped in the same cycle, the same loop. I had walked through the door, only to find myself at the beginning again. I had been here all along. The field, once so serene, had turned into something else entirely. The golden light now felt sterile, like it was illuminating a truth that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. I stood there, frozen, as the house loomed before me, casting its dark shadow over the landscape. I should have known. I should have realized sooner. There was no escape. The wind whispered around me, carrying with it the faint sound of footsteps. Footsteps that echoed in my mind, familiar and yet foreign. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the empty space. The voice had returned, but this time, it wasn't just a whisper in the back of my mind. It was here, right in front of me. The other me. He was standing just a few feet away, his form outlined by the fading sunlight. His expression was no longer twisted, no longer cruel. It was calm, almost accepting. "It's time," he said, his voice soft, resigned. "You've come full circle." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to deny it all. I couldn't accept this. Couldn't accept that I had walked this path for so long, only to end up back here. "This is your truth," he continued, stepping closer. "This is who you are. You can't run from it anymore." I looked down at my hands, trembling with the weight of his words. The house, the forest, the void, all of it had been a reflection of my own mind, a manifestation of my deepest fears and truths. The longer I had run, the closer I had gotten to the inevitable. And now I was standing at the edge of it all. The end. I looked up at the house again. The door was open, waiting for me. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. This wasn't the first time I had seen this house, nor would it be the last. I stepped forward, my feet moving of their own accord, dragging me toward the door. It was like the house itself was pulling me in, drawing me toward the inevitable confrontation. I reached for the door, my hand resting on the cool metal of the handle. It was familiar, comforting, but it was a comfort born of nothingness. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. The walls were cracked and peeling, the floorboards creaked beneath my feet. It felt like nothing had changed since the first time I had entered. The same shadows lurked in the corners, the same silence suffocating the room. But this time, there was no reflection in the mirror. No other me standing in the shadows, no twisted version of myself waiting to confront me. Just silence, and then I heard it. A faint whisper, a voice soft and distant. It was never about the house. I froze, the words crashing through my mind like a wave. I had been searching for answers in the wrong place. The house, the reflection, the endless pursuit of escape. It had all been a distraction. The real answer, the real truth, had been within me all along. I turned slowly, looking around the room. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening again. The house wasn't just a building, it was a part of me, a part of my mind, my fears, my regrets, my darkness. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. The truth had finally been revealed, and there was no turning back. I couldn't run from it any longer. "It's time to face it," I whispered to myself. The voice, the reflection, everything I had been running from. It had all been me. The darkness, the fear, the lies. It was all mine. I closed my eyes and took another breath, steadying myself for the final confrontation. When I opened my eyes again, the house was gone. The field was gone. The darkness was gone. And in its place was a vast, empty space. I was standing alone in nothingness. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. There was nothing left to fear. "This is the end," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But it wasn't a whisper of dread. It wasn't a whisper of despair. It was a whisper of release. I had faced the truth. I had confronted my own darkness. And now there was nothing left to hold me in this prison of my mind. No more running, no more fear. I was free.